Welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. It's the October episode and it's a really good one. So as you know, in August we had a contest where Suzanne Zork Feathers won. She came here and stayed for a weekend this month, and her submission to win that contest was the idea to create one of those old haunted paintings that you'd see in like Scooby-Doo or Dark Shadows, where a sinister figure is staring at you from behind an old painting. So that's what we're about to create, and it's going to be amazing. So let's begin. My very first step is going to be to create two paintings, one for myself and one for Suzanne. You don't have to do this step if you don't want to. You could just go online and find like a free use image and have it printed and follow the later part of this tutorial. But if you really want to go crazy, which is what I'm going to do, I'm essentially going to be taking chunks and pieces of paintings that I like on the internet and sort of melding or Frankensteining them into one cohesive, beautiful image with my face and one of hers. I created Suzanne's portrait off camera, and I used a John Singer Sargent portrait as the base for this image. I then had it printed and ready to go when she arrived for the weekend, but then we ended up getting into so much mischief, there really wasn't any time to do a craft. By the way, it was such an incredibly fun weekend. I will absolutely be doing these again in the future. For my portrait, I'm using two paintings by Philip Alexis de Laszlo. He is another one of my absolute favorite painters. Let's talk about makeup. So I'm going to digitally remove some of the makeup I'm wearing in this picture, and you can either do that step or take a picture of yourself with very minimal makeup. The reason you want to do this is, obviously in the 1800s, early 1900s, people weren't wearing lots of eyeshadow, mascara, and severe lipstick. So if you incorporate that, it's going to make the painting jump out as wrong. So just avoid that step and you're going to end up with a painting that looks a lot more period. Now that I've got a picture that I'm really, really happy with, I'm going to cut it out and apply it to the first painting. I chose this painting specifically because the color is so incredible and beautiful, so that's kind of what drew me to this initial picture. It's really helpful when you take that picture of yourself to already have a painting in mind that you're going to be sort of working off of, and the reason for that is you want to try to mirror the lighting in both of those images because they're just going to kind of blend together better if you do that. Now, one of the first things we're going to do to try to make this image look like a painting is erase the natural highlight on my eye and go in and paint in a fresh one. You can also go into your filter gallery and add kind of a painterly effect. Now, you don't want to apply this filter over the entire face. You just want to kind of strategically place it here and there. So you might notice my setup looks a little bit different, and I have you guys to thank for that. In the photography episode, it was brought up that I've kind of got a bad situation set up, so I'm now sitting at a desk. I'm waiting for a better chair to come in, and I did get this thing called a Wacom Cintiq. It's basically a digital canvas that you can paint and mark on directly, and it does make this process go a lot faster. So thank you guys for that feedback. I'm now ready to bring in another element of one of those other paintings. This is kind of a larger piece, and so I'm going to actually have to enlarge the entire canvas that I'm working on. It's really great to make sure that the tones, like the contrast, are matching with all of these images as you blend them, and also making sure that the color tones really kind of go with each other, because those are really things that are going to ultimately marry this together in sort of an undetectable way. Now I'm going back into Adobe Stock and I'm grabbing an image that's just kind of a generic painted background because it's going to have all of these great textures that take, time to create. And so I can just work this in and then manipulate it until it sort of looks how I want it to. Liquify is up in the filter section, and it is the tool that I'm currently using to shift this silhouette and make a few changes so that it kind of closer resembles my own figure. Let's talk about hair. This is going to be the trickiest part of this painting because the truth is we live in a different society than when these paintings were done, and our standards of beauty are very different. So trying to take one of those old hairstyles and making it work on your face, from like a stranger looking at it, it might look right, but you are going to feel like you look terrible. So it's kind of a dance to create a silhouette and style that does still look period, but makes you look nice. So that's what we're going to be getting into right now. This is going to look incredibly rough for a little while because I'm really just sort of trying to find the silhouette that really flatters my face the most. And I'm even going to have to go online and do a little research of hairstyles of that day to make sure I'm going in the right direction. Sometimes things just work out beautifully and sometimes they're frustrating, and this was one of those. So when I get to that place, sometimes I just throw it in Liquify, smear it around until it sort of looks like something I'm happy with, and then I start manipulating it from there. This is the place where the Cintiq is really kind of changing my life because making all of these like individual strands is so much easier with a pen against the screen. And up until this point, so for 10 or so more years, I've been literally doing this with just a mouse, which is doable, but it takes a lot longer. Now it's really starting to look beautiful. I'm so happy with it, and I can begin incorporating like the highlights and the shadows. For me, no image is really complete until I somehow incorporate a little bit of my Mr. Biggles into it. And so I'm taking the morning locket that I keep for him and I'm gonna sort of blend it into this painting. What I'm doing now is going in and really creating that painted effect by taking the paintbrush and sort of manipulating the shadows and the highlights to sort of exaggerate everything, make it seem much more painted and a lot less photographed. Minimizing the ultra fine details and kind of softening all of the edges are really the things that are going to ultimately sell this piece as something that looks like a genuine antique, even though it is kind of just a fun prop. Thankfully, one bit of makeup that you can really kind of go a little bonkers with is blush, because that is absolutely something they definitely emphasized in these old portraits. Now, to really kind of make this my own, I'm going to add my own sinister sort of signature. I always really love flipping back and forth and seeing how much progress I've made. So that arm just looked a little bit too far over for my liking, so I'm gonna shift it over just a touch. Reversing your image is actually a terrific tool you can use to sort of spot some of the things that maybe you weren't paying attention to and just kind of give you like a fresh perspective. The very last thing you need to do is one of the most critical. You need to measure the distance between each of your pupils and make sure that the painting, when it prints, is going to align with that. And what I did here is I took one of those apps on your phone that you measure for glasses, because this is the measurement in millimeters that you typically get. To ensure you've got this right, once you have that number in millimeters, you can open up Photoshop and slowly enlarge the image and make sure it's being displayed at its actual size, not 100%. And you just incrementally increase it until it matches the exact same distance in millimeters. And that's what I did. I just held up a ruler against the computer screen and it worked out great. Now the painting is done and it's off to the printer. Let's talk about printers. Because obviously we have to do this quite a bit for what we do for a living, I have a good amount of experience now with really, really expensive printers and just like online printers. Online printers, you can't really like get color samples back, which is frustrating. And then big expensive printers, sometimes you're not happy with the product you end up getting and they're difficult to deal with and it's expensive. So I've found the best printer I've ever worked with. It's Boston Pro Print in Boston, Massachusetts. Jay and Steve are who I've been dealing with now, and this is my second year working with them. It sounds like an infomercial, but I'm telling you, they're amazing. So if you need a good printer, check them out. So now let's get started on the fun part. I went to an antique store and found these frames that I'm now going to remove the art from and get ready for these paintings. My local lumber yard was able to cut these pieces in advance for me, which was so nice because I didn't have to break out the jigsaw. They are about 1/8 inch thick by 30 by 40 inches. And I'm now just sanding off the edges so I don't inadvertently get any splinters. And now I'm mending anything that seemed kind of off about the frames. And then I'm going to actually lay down those pre-cut pieces of wood just to make sure that they're fitting in right. The base for the painting that I'm creating needs a pretty good frame around the edges. So that's what I'm going to do now. Make sure you remove any jewelry before you work with any of these electric tools. This is actually a pretty simple step. I'm just going to be cutting all of these 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch boards at a 45-degree angle and then gluing and stapling them to that really thin piece of board that I had pre-cut just to kind of give this thing a lot of stability without too much bulk there in the middle. When you're feeling pretty good about it and you think it's just about done, it's also helpful to have a professional inspect it. Okay, this is looking poof approved. I actually requested 4 prints of this painting just in case I mess up. This is a new project for me, so I always like to play it a little bit safe. And of course, the printer did such a good job, I didn't even need any samples. For a little bit of stability, I'm going to tack in the top of this painting, and then I'll be cutting out those eyes. This is really where you want to be meticulous, and I'm really just cutting out the physical eyeball, not any of the eyelid or the lacrimal carbuncle. Okay, I didn't really know that last word. I had to Google it. It's basically that squishy membrane on the side of your eyeball. Now I'm going to roll the painting up and out of the way, and I'm gonna actually use some of that wallpaper paste that I used on the dress form. Any hoarder will tell you this, that there is something so vindicating about finding a second life for some of the remnants of a previous project. You want to avoid rolling over the eye cutouts here, but you can use just a dry paint roller to smooth out some of these air bubbles and little imperfections. I don't believe this is how you would actually mount real canvas onto a frame, but we are just kind of trying to create some tension so that the image lays perfectly flat. I always try to remember that you're never too old not to have a little fun while you're crafting. I bet no one here can tell that I watch a whole lot of Baumgartner restoration videos on YouTube. He actually uses some sort of a magnetized nail or hammer that looks so neat, and I need to figure out where to get those. No project is complete unless I break out a Dremel tool, so now I'm using that to very, very delicately cut out the eye holes here. I'm not entirely sure the stub is going to make any difference, but I have fairly deep set eyes, so I'm trying to create a slightly thinner layer in the sections that my face are going to be pressing against this image. Using the same 1/8 inch thick board, I'm pressing a piece of that behind the image, tracing that out, and now I'm going to shape these down so that they fit nice and snug into those sockets. Don't ever get your fingers so close to one of these things. Luckily, all I broke here was a fingernail. So you might wonder why I'm always showing you like my near accidents and the terrible things that can happen. And it is because I want you to see, how dangerous some of this equipment is. And I hope that you learn from some of my foolishness. So if I ever do something goofy and dangerous, the reason I show you this stuff is because I want you to sort of be cognizant of how dangerous it can be. So let's keep going. Losing just one fingernail was enough for me, so now I'm using my Dremel tool to perfect these down until they fit right in. So the initial method I was going to use to make this apparatus involved a hinge. And then, I kept hearing like thumping down in the cellar, and the captive, I guess, had his own idea that involved magnets. So I don't know, we're gonna see if this works. And if it isn't, he's just not gonna get any dessert. I'm taping this board into place so it doesn't budge, and then I'm going to mix up some Gorilla Glue 2-part epoxy to set these in. If anybody here has ever played the game Operation, this next step should be pretty simple. If your piece fits back in nice and snug, then we are ready to move on to installing magnets. We're going to start that by pre-drilling out the board. I pre-drilled out my cavity about an 1/8 inch too deep, and I'll explain why I've done that later. Now I'm using that Gorilla Glue to glue in 1/2 of the magnet system into that cavity. Now the reason that I dug that out just a little bit too deep is I don't want these magnets to totally touch because that would make a clacking sound, and this is supposed to be really discreet. But at the moment, I'm just using a little bit of sawdust to create a separation between the two, and ultimately I'll be putting in a little bit of felt between them. You want to ensure that the magnet is perfectly flush with the wood, and then I'm going to put a little bit of that Gorilla Glue right into the center, not too much, you don't want it to bleed out, and then we'll be pressing this onto the image and letting it set for a good amount of time. Once taped into place, I laid the image down on its back and let it rest for about 3 hours. To minimize the risk of ultimately losing this board over time, I'm going to be affixing it with a bit of twine and drilling some strategic holes. I'm now gluing in that felt and making sure that when these magnets connect, it's completely silent. And now to put the eyes back on, I'm using a little bit of super glue to adhere these. To ensure that the painting is not only protected, but to also give it kind of a texture that makes it look like an authentic painting, I'm applying some of this matte finishing gel. It will dry completely clear, so you want to just go over your entire painting and trace around kind of where all of the visible brush marks lay, and that should give it a fairly realistic look. The width of my canvas was a touch thick for like standard mounting brackets that you get at the hardware store. So I cut these little boards, I'm pre-drilling them, and they should sort of just assist this in fitting in there nice and clean. Once you've affixed your wire, you want to mount this painting directly against a wall that has a secret passageway on the opposite side. Unfortunately, most modern homes don't have hidden paths directly behind the walls. So if you find yourself in that position, I will be showing how to still make this effect possible in a separate episode. I hope you've loved this project. It's one of my favorites for some reason. I'm so excited to just like see this painting up on the wall all the time. And thank you guys so much for your entries into that amazing contest. We're going to be doing more contests in the coming years. So look forward to that and have a very happy Halloween.